could try to even improve upon it. That stuff is really juicy. It's really good to put yourself through. It's like the best boot camp. So nice to meet you, man.
Nice to meet you.
You sent some questions and you wanted to talk about some stuff.
Yep, yep.
All right, I don't have them in front of me right now, but
Would you want me to send them to Discord? Always just copy
no, no, it's
over.
okay. You can just read them off maybe, because I
Right,
read through them and
right.
they all seemed fine. So
Okay, cool. All right. Shall we begin then?
let's do it.
Cool, cool. So, um, I know you kind of talked about this really in your when you're going through someone's reel. You're you're thinking about how you'd go about the clip, but I kind of wanted you to kind of go about telling me in general when you're confronted with a scene with just video, someone sent you the playback and you need to add the sounds for that video. What's the first thing that goes through your head while watching the video, um, that you begin to think about for adding sound effects for it? And just finding the sound effects in general.
So are you talking about like an animated thing where there's no production sound at all and it's just a silent video basically?
Exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, it's obviously a lot harder when you just get a silent video. Usually, decent video editors will have some temp sound there as to what they were thinking. Um, well, first it depends on the context. So is this like a commercial or is it a animated TV show or a cinematic? Because based on those things, it will kind of differ what you focus on in most cases. So is there specific
Right.
like medium or type of media that?
Yes. So if this would be, for example, a cinematic that you're working on,
hmm Okay, yeah, so like a game cinematic,
right?
those will usually have some temp audio to be a good jumping off point, but let's say it doesn't. So most people enjoy getting backgrounds and Foley kind of covered first, to kind of give the scene some realness and weight, and make it feel a bit more alive, and then building, more interesting design stuff on top of it, whether there's like a some fight that happens or a ship that flies by or something. That's easier to do a bit when there's some sound already playing, so you're not just kind of working in a vacuum. Um,
Okay.
but it doesn't really matter at the end of the day. I think what's important to practice is spending a lot of time studying other cinematics and things like that to kind of understand what a good finished product sounds like, and building up your kind of chops and your instinct, kind of training your instinct to go in that direction more. And then when you get a silent cinematic, you can start to already hear kind of what it should sound like and some interesting ideas. And of course, you're not going to hear exactly how you're going to make it. It's not like visual art where it's like, I'm going to put a tree here and the shadow's going to be here and this and that. It's
Right.
gonna it's gonna be, you don't know what textures you'll end up using or what tones, but you'll have some kind of an idea of what the power should be and how the dynamics of the scene should play out. I think a good exercise is watching similar media and then just muting it and watching it and thinking about it in your head and then rewinding and turning the sound back on. And I'm talking about like well done cinematics, probably games that have won awards for cinematic sound design, or are just generally very revered. I wouldn't look at like lower budget or less experienced. But, you want to aim as high as you can
Yeah.
with what standard you're building within yourself. So I would do
Yeah.
things like that, like watching like a really great like God of War cinematic or something like that, and just having it on mute and pretend that this cinematic was delivered to you and you had to cut it. And then you can rewind and turn the sound back on and think, okay, what if I had cut it like this? And listen, and
Cool.
that'll start training your instinct a bit, and your ear to kind of know, okay, like, my weapons should kind of be this character with this this frequency range and this type of aggression and dynamics in them. And the
Mm.
music's going to probably be around here, and um,
It's kind of like training my ears to, not only my ears but my thoughts to align with what the actual sound designers had in mind.
yeah, and that, as you're starting out, you want to try to aim to be comparable to really good sound designers, and then as you continue on in your career, you'll start getting the confidence to be able to differ off and create your own perspectives and versions of things that might disagree with what other people have done, but it may be better. Um, but yeah, that's what I would do, is just training that, and then if you get a silent cinematic delivered to you, it'll become a lot easier, and you'll have that bank of knowledge and experience from just studying, to be able to go, okay, uh, because knowing when something sounds good or doesn't is really a big part. It's like half the battle, I would say, if not more.
Mm.
And knowing when to stop, is very important as well. Because more isn't always better. So yeah, I think that would be a big thing. And then obviously we're listening to the music. Hopefully you have some music reference or something that's going to affect. If you have very legato strings playing over a scene, and there's a battle going on, you probably can't have as many long tail elements in your sound effects. You probably want to keep it short and punchy, and so
Right.
it can cut through that mix easily. And vice versa, if you have some arpeggiated synth thing that's going up 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 up, you probably want longer ADSR sounds and things that are not going to be competing with the punchiness of that music. So
Mm.
it's a big kind of weird equation, but if you just keep studying and listening to other things with that intention, of looking at it from a sound designer's perspective, it'll over time you'll start to really just understand what makes a scene feel good, and then at the end of the day, if the story and the emotion is thoroughly communicated, because it's not always about just cutting what you see. It's about understanding what the director wants and the story that's trying to be told, and how you can make maybe creative choices to show, whether it be the perspective and the consciousness of the main protagonist, of what they're thinking about and what they're focusing on, or from the
Yeah.
audience, if there's some connection with some character in that scene already, if you can, there's lots of things that you can do to really squeeze that juice out and get it,
Yeah.
feeling
And
good.
like you said, it obviously depends on what it is. Kind of like we were talking about the league thing I sent you the very first time we talked.
Hmm.
The league just being stylized to be minimal sound design and focus on the music. Like you said, it depends on what the director wants and what's the target, what's
Yeah.
the focus.
Yeah,
So
for sure. There's you need to understand the IP you're working in, for sure. And a lot of the more comic book superhero slash champion based games like League of Legends and Valorant and Overwatch and things like that tend to have a sound palette that, as far as, I mean, this is my opinion, but it uh, it reflects a bit more of like the lighter, almost cartoon slash anime style stuff. Whereas you have other games like Dark Souls and Demon Souls and Call of Duties and things like that that come from a more visceral, punchy, hard hitting, and neither one is better or worse. It's just kind of what that audience is used to, and understanding that's very important, because you can't just come and flip the script without a good reason. So it's good to understand, where it's very similar to music, right? Like,
yeah,
there's a lot of history that needs to be accounted for, and what people are used to consuming, and because it's all just vibrations coming out of a tweeter and a woofer at the end of the day. We have associations with specific sounds that give them meaning, and so yeah, that's a good point.
yeah. And I'm coming to the point where obviously I think as sound designers we try we really try to make our sound design over the top. We and at least I think it's a good training point to make myself push, because too little is too little. Too much, you can always just push back. The re-recording mixer could always just, get rid of that. But still, you'd have to. It all depends on the project.
Yeah, yeah, it does, and I agree. It's if there are heavy hitting layers in there, they can be turned off, and it can be brought down to something more lighter and drier and realer. A lot easier than adding that in after the fact, as if a mixer is dealing with it or something. So, I think and just as a creator, it's easier to go back to understanding, because when you create if you do a good job with a heavy hitting visceral sound design piece, you're still going to need to understand textures and dynamics and pacing and tone, and noise, and all these things are very important, and they're a lot easier to understand, I think, when you're cutting more of a lighter, fluffier feeling scene, because you don't need to deal with as much of that low end and transient attacky things, setting off limiters and stuff to be pumping, and it is simpler. So I think your instinct is right there for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Next question. Okay, this is a general question about reverb. So, I notice when I design reverbs, depending what environment it's in, could be, I don't know, a mountain area, could be in a room. I guess it's more of a technique thing where I don't understand each setting of a reverb to kind of look at the scene and be like, okay, in a room setting that's this big, this is what it kind of needs. So my question with that is, depending the environment, could be a large hall, could be a very small room. Let's say you have this one sound design effect you've made. Depending what room it's in, how would you change that with what the environment is?
So are we talking a game, or are we talking like a film or cinematic? Is this linear?
Linear, yeah.
Okay. So, and the sound effect would be like someone shoots a gun or something in the room,
Right.
and then they run out into the hall and shoot it out there or something, maybe.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, I'd ask what kind of reverb you're using. So, I mean, I'd hope that it would be something sophisticated like Altiverb, or one of those other high-end, high-fidelity and IR-based reverb systems, not something that was designed for music as much.
Right. So what we have at the moment in the company isn't that, but I'm hoping to get more, like you said, convolution reverbs and things of the high end. Yeah.
Yeah, you want some impulse response reverbs that are good, and the Altiverb stereo version isn't as bad, and you can still cut, even if you have to cut 5.1, you can still use that and get away with it. But yeah, I mean, for me, it's keeping it as simple as possible. And I mean, if you're designing kind of a cool, hyped up sounding gun, and you want it to fit in that room, it's really just about, I mean, I would go to a shooting range if you have one. I'm in America, so they're easy to find, but I don't know if in Italy or on your island if you're able to. But
No, we have some shooting range.
okay, good. And yeah, and hear what a gun sounds like in a concrete room, and more of just the character of it is really important, because yeah, that's really the main thing, is having that, because it sounds very bright, especially in a concrete room, and most rooms aren't concrete if it's like a house room, but it's so just knowing what that end result kind of needs to be will make it, I think, a lot. And it won't even matter if you know what the controls of each of the reverb's parameters are, or whatever. It's you can get there, whether it's through reverb controls or if it's through EQ type stuff or if it's through the layers that you pick when you're designing the sound. There's so many ways to get to a usable result. So I wouldn't stress thinking like you need to find the one right way. Oftentimes I'll sit there, and whether it's making something feel like it's in the right space, like you're talking about, or if it's something else like making a sound, I'll sit there for hours and feel like a total imposter, like a total just like I don't know what the hell I'm doing, but I do know. It's just I don't know the fastest way always to do everything, and that's fine. And as sound designers, a lot of times we feel like we're being I don't what's the word? It's like we're fakers, like we don't really know what we're doing, and it's because
Yeah,
it's
you're experimenting to find what your ears think.
yeah, and you're trying that
Yeah,
you have something in your head that you know it should sound like, and getting there is just a matter of trying shit. And
yeah,
we have so many different tools that we can use to, and I'll have random layers in my thing with the EQs cutting out so much of the sound and just using a little part because I thought it needed a little more like mid-low for the it gets stupid, but at the end of the day no one cares. It's just about what the end result is. So really learning what that should sound like, and you don't have to go to a real gun range either. You can listen to other successful, like really well done films or games or whatever where there has been a similar action happening in a similar space. And that's where having a good library in your head and knowing a bunch of different movies and things like that to be able to, oh, the Matrix has a scene where he shoots a gun in this room or whatever. And then hearing how they did that, and it might surprise you. It might be something very different than maybe what you had thought, and open things up a bit. But really understanding, like at the end of the day, how it should sound before you kind of sit down to start editing it will make all these things so much easier. And there's lots of different ways to get there. It's a lot of it's experience, but it can be sped up with studying films and games and listening with a lot of intention like that, and trying to recreate. If you have off time and you think there's a really cool moment in a film sound-wise, like if you're watching, Captain Marvel and you love how it sounds when her fists light up with the fire and how to make that magic effect, try to recreate it. And you'll learn so much in that process if you really just sit down and spend 12 hours, trying to make that sound. It's like it's gonna be a exhausting 12 hours, but you're gonna get so much out of it. You're gonna get people pay tens of thousands of dollars to go to school to learn what you would probably learn in that half a day of just really, because even if you don't get there, even if you don't make the right sound, the tricks that you'll learn and the things you'll discover and the techniques and the happy accidents that happen, it'll just all become ammo that you can have.
yeah.
Yeah.
And even just during that process, you realize what you do know and what you don't. So then the things you don't know, you kind of say, right, why don't I know this? Why am I struggling with this one thing?
Sure.
And I think it's important, like realizing where your flaws are.
Yeah.
And learning from it.
Definitely.
Yeah, and I think you make a good point there with saying that since you as a sound designer know what rooms sound like just from not only experience but from hearing it, whether it's from films, whether it's from games, or from actually going to like the example of a gun range, I think that's where I need to keep listening, because you have that experience of hearing it, and so I have like this sort of disconnect in my head where you know what it sounds like and I don't, from experience and just hearing things.
Yeah, I think I want to rephrase that too, because it's important to understand when we take things that we have real life experience hearing and influence our sound design for movies, films, games, commercials, whatever. I think what's important is to understand not what it sounds like in person, but what it feels like. So shooting a gun in real life helps me edit guns, not because I'm not hearing shit. I'm wearing ear protection, it's muffled, it's like you're not, but you're feeling it. You're feeling the power and the low end of that hitting you and the punchiness, and then the crack on top and kind of the power of it. and different. And if you shoot different guns, you feel the different types of power. And a shotgun having this more brute, kind of punchy like thing, and then a pistol having more of a lighter yet still slappy kind of. So it's you get that physical reaction to hearing things, even if it's a plane going by in real life, even if it's in the distance. Part of your nervous system is picking up those vibrations. It's not just all your eardrums. And that full body experience of hearing it and how you interpret that into, as that plane is going fast and it's a big plane. Why do I think that besides seeing it? Because I'm hearing the filtered, sounds of the engine, and there's this
Yeah.
weird low end that pops in a little bit, and it's just trying not to think about it too much as like just sound, but as a very physical sensation, because we need to compensate for that when we're just putting pre-recorded sounds that we've processed and layered together through speakers, right? Because they're not going to get that same impact of. That's why like guns in Hollywood will have a lot of low end and stuff added to them, because they're trying to give you that burst of air to make you feel like you're shooting a gun or something, or hearing a gun being shot near you. So it's good to really understand the physical kind of interaction with the world, and that hearing is, because it's not just what comes through your ears. It's how your whole body feels the vibrations in the air too, and how your mind interprets that into being powerful or distant or pretty, or all those things.
Yeah, which is an interesting thought, because you're essentially translating your feelings into what you feel, but what you want the viewers not only to feel but hear.
hmm
So I think that's an interesting thought, because you're translating what you feel into what you hear as well.
Yeah, and that's where the artist part comes in, and trying to communicate, what kind of a experience this gunshot or this plane by or whatever it is that you're, adding to a scene. Understanding, what emotion different things evoke, and you don't want to overcomplicate things. Not every gunshot has to be this emotional experience, but it's good to just have in mind and be in tune with that, because people spend all their time just struggling to make something sound good. When it's like, yes, everything we do should be aesthetically pleasing at the end of the day. But that can take us, we can't follow that road to the end. We need to stop at some point and go, is this giving the effect to the viewer that is intended, that I want them to feel? And it gets very abstract, but that's what also makes it so fun, is kind of that little brain puzzle that we get to do.
Yeah.
And I'm going on like crazy tangents. You were asking me about like reverb, how to get Altiverb. That's my advice for get a good impulse response reverb if they can't afford Altiverb, or trial of Altiverb at least, and pick the living room or bedroom setting or whatever and play with it, and you'll be 90% there. And then just don't use outside gun recordings if you're using like real recordings if it was a gunshot, for example. Like, don't use recordings that were recorded in a canyon, maybe. And if you do, cut the tail off. But, yeah.
No, I mean, I'm glad we're going on these tangents. I don't think you're just going on the tangent. I'm following you there, so don't think you're kind of going off on your own.
Groovy.
Cool. Man, I have a lot of mental notes going on right now.
So this is all recorded, so
yeah,
you'll be able to rewatch this if you want.
Yeah, no, I mean, so far learning a lot, so I appreciate you doing this.
Good, of course. Yeah, that's what it's for, man. Glad it's benefiting.
Yeah. And by the way, in terms of sound design, you were the first person I actually watched on YouTube.
Really? That's cool.
And
Wow.
and
My
one
little
of the
channel?
most, yeah, even though it's kind of a small channel, the most helpful,
Aw,
honestly.
that's great, man. Thank you.
In terms of sound design, fully focused, because there are a lot of channels on maybe post, but creatively, specifically on sound design, you really nailed it with your videos.
Thank you, man. Thanks. Yeah, I was noticing a bit of a gap in the YouTube stuff with just, a lot of it was like video editors talking about how to add sound effects, and the other ones were kind
Right.
of more junior people. So I wanted to, not that I'm some, crazy expert, but I felt like I could give people some knowledge. So I'm glad that happened a bit for you. Good.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, a lot of video editors, or either it was a lot of people focusing on post for film,
Hmm.
which for me is great, but specifically delving in on sound design,
Yeah.
you really nailed it with your videos. So,
Thank you, man.
so
It's great to hear.
yeah, appreciate it a lot. Um, in fact, like when we first started talking, the first thing I did was kind of tell the people I was working with, because where I work, I have someone above me who kind of messes around with everything. It's not just sound design. He's a writer, he's a director.
Mm.
He was one of those when the company was small. He had to do everything because they didn't have anyone else to do it. So he can like mix for film and deliver things for short indie films. Um, so he kind of trained me to where I am right now. But even me just telling him like, yeah, I talked to Braden Parks, and um, yeah, it's exciting, man, because um, you're you're open with the people who watch you as well, and you help them out, like in the YouTube comments and in general. So I appreciate it a lot
Oh,
as
shit.
someone
Thanks,
who watches
man.
videos. So,
That makes me feel really good. Thank you. That's what it's all for. So good.
yeah, honestly, you have a good thing going with your YouTube channel.
Thanks. I know I should try to do more. I just been so busy. But yeah,
Yeah,
thank you.
no,
That's
I'm
very
sure you'll
inspiring to
get
hear. I
there.
probably will. Um,
Great, man. Yeah,
cool.
cool. Let's see. Next question. Um, I'm gonna go through the general questions first,
Okay.
and then we can delve deep into specifics I have. Um, all right. So, as a sound designer, kind of starting off or working on their craft, earning their craft, some general techniques and practices you think someone should work on a daily. What's something you'd advise?
So you're starting off, and just to like sharpen your skills, you're assuming you understand how to use kind of the basic tools already, and just refining your skills is what you're asking.
Yeah, going from beginner, you're sort of amateurish. How would you earn your craft on a daily basis?
I think recreating sound effects is like a super underrated practice that is not it's not as sexy of a thing to think about, but it really just those are some of the moments where I've just had the biggest strides in my chops of processing and choosing sounds and layering things. And um, I think finding, yeah, like really good sounding games or films and like award winners for sound, and finding your favorite sound effect, or if you need the inspiration, just find your favorite sound effect you've ever heard, or that can think of, and try to recreate it, and give yourself like a 5 or 6 hour time window, or a 2 hour time window, or whatever. um, and it'll really, it's just like I was saying before, it teaches you so much, and you get so good at, because you have to listen to that sound and understand so much about it, what the source might have been, what kind of textures are they getting, how are they achieving those, what does the low end feel like, how is my low end in my mock-up different, and how can I get it to sound like this,
Mm.
why does theirs maybe sound better than mine, and working through those difficult problems just strengthens you so much. It's like taking steroids on your mind for understanding, sound just in general and how to manipulate it. Um, so I would do that. And again, let me reiterate, it's not about if you successfully get there or not. You learn so much along the way. So even if you spend 3 days and you can't get it to sound like, and the goal is that you can have that your sound effect that you made and the original one, and play them, put them side by side, and close your eyes and not be able to tell the difference. You could have a friend come and play one randomly and you wouldn't know if it was yours. So getting there is like near impossible. It's of course doable, but it's not about getting there perfectly. It's about what you learn and how much stronger your ear gets. Um, and who knows, you might end up making a sound effect that sounds better, right? It's all subjective, but it could be of better, it could be punchier and more visceral and more impactful than that one. Because who knows, especially if it was a TV show or something, they might have had, an hour to cut that sound and they just did their best. But if you have all the time in the world, you could try to even improve upon it. That stuff is really juicy. It's really good to put yourself through. It's like the best boot camp. Um, and it's crazy to me that schools that sell these degrees to people for so much money I don't think they do that kind of stuff. I've talked to a good amount of people that have gone to various trade schools and sound schools, creative digital media schools, things like that, music schools, high-end ones too. And it's like you're not doing those things there, and so you come out and you don't really have much chops in, you know,
Yeah.
yeah, it's such an easy thing to do, if you have the gear, the software, and the few libraries and plugins, and some time. Uh, you could become an insane sound designer just doing that like every day for a few months, maybe a year, and then obviously there are other things to the craft than just that, but that's the hard part. That's getting your ear to that level, and your ability to recognize source that people have used. Um, so
Right.
yeah.
And it's funny you say that about the schools because we I know someone as well who went to one of these high-end schools in America, like
Hmm.
very a high-end school for filmmaking in general.
Mm.
And if you met him and saw what he did, you wouldn't know.
Mm.
You wouldn't say, "All right, he really studied this." I mean, I'm sure it's personality as well. Some people thrive in school, some people don't.
Hmm.
But if you met him, you wouldn't say, "Wow, this school really made him."
Yeah.
And like you were talking about in your um, video where you're giving advice to that one person on making this your career.
Hmm.
It's the way they word things on their websites for schools. They're selling the idea, and
Hmm. Selling the
and which
dream.
is why
Yeah.
yeah, and which is why a lot of people like me, people who are very young. I mean, I just turned 18. People who are my age, hearing those things kind of make us want to go there without even knowing, firstly, how much money it is, how much it costs, because I have no idea how much money like 100K is.
Hmm.
I mean, I know it's a lot, but I never had that much money.
Right.
I don't understand how much it is, which obviously it's a lot. So yeah, which is why I'm glad I'm where I am with this company, because school would have never taught me this much.
Yeah. I think you're very wise. I think, school is good for some people, for sure. Some people need it. I think if you're very sure of this field, um, even if you're not sure, actually, just not going to school and at least trying to make it, you could always go back to school or start college at 23 or 24, but give yourself 4, 5, 6 years to just do it. And then if you wanted, even if you wanted to change careers in 8 or 9 or 10 years, you wouldn't have all this debt from becoming a sound designer now that's weighing on your decision. You could go to school for marketing or whatever. So yeah, I think there are great benefits there. I agree. And yeah, people your age, a lot, not just people your age, most people don't understand money and aren't good with money. And it's sad, and a lot of people suffer because of that. But especially people like leaving high school, having this decision to make of going into this amount of debt, and that will always follow you. You know, you can't escape it. And also the pressure of parents to go seek higher education. It's really not a great cocktail to walk into. And so I'm glad that if I can help at all, people see that, like, yeah, I didn't do a day of college, and I doing pretty well. I'm pretty happy. So it's if you want to be a lawyer, you want to be a doctor, or if you just aren't good at learning on your own and you really want that classroom setting, no shame, right? We're all different, but if you feel like you can handle it, like it seems like you're doing well, and you can really put in the work and make calls and try to get an internship to an assistant job to a job and climb the ladder that way. Uh, I mean, you're basically earning 100K for yourself right there up front because you're not spending it on
Yeah.
on school or whatever, so it pays off.
And since the majority of entrepreneurs is considerably low compared to average jobs, a lot of people don't see their proof that they can do it without school.
Yeah, and that's
So
part of the reason I was trying to be public with that, because yeah, it's especially my generation was probably one of the earliest, to really start succeeding without college. Our parents were like, they, of course you went to college. The prices weren't all fucked up yet. It was still affordable and it made sense. But yeah, I mean, for a lot of people, especially if you want to get into a creative digital field like this, yeah, you just and I will be having a course released at some point, to help people kind of be as like a replacement. It'll be like 1/50th the price of college, but hopefully containing stuff to help people be able to just walk into a job and know everything they need to do and not have any weird surprises, and be able to function. Because a lot of people leaving school aren't able to do that. They still need to be taught all kinds of basic stuff. And it's sad. It's I feel like they got ripped off, and it makes me angry. So
yes, same here. And it's funny that, at least from my knowledge, now you know more people who have actually went to these big colleges. These colleges from like the 90s to now, I don't know what's changed other than price. Personally, other than gear, hardware, syllabus wise, I don't know.
yeah, I mean, I don't think sound design degrees existed in the 90s, but yeah,
True.
they're not always. Let me just put it this way. There's a saying that's kind of a mean saying, and I don't believe it fully, but there is a saying, those who can't do, teach. And I think there are a lot of very talented teachers out there, especially if you go to a higher end school, like Musicians Institute or Berkeley or USC or something like that. If you're in the States, I'm not familiar with colleges overseas as much. But there are a lot of high end schools that do get amazing people in, even if they're just giving a talk. It's like super valuable. So I'm not going to downplay that. But also, I will counter that, say, like these trade schools and stuff that have all these courses and classes, you're not being taught by people that were able to make a great living because people wanted to hire them so badly to work on their projects. So, they can teach you how to use the gear, sure, and what attack, decay, sustain, release is, but can they teach you, the aesthetic and the approach to get there? Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
If you want to take that gamble, it's up to you. But I don't know. Yeah. Anyway, I could go on and on about colleges. What's the next question?
I'll just say one more thing.
Uh-huh.
Because I have quite an opinion about colleges as well. As you can probably tell already.
Mhm.
But even just schools in general, like you're saying about music schools like Musicians Institute or Berkeley. Sure, they get a lot of famous musicians who come in and give one-on-one lessons. But if I got those musicians one-on-one privately, instead of going to a school, it's already way cheaper than going to that school. Just having private
True.
lessons from
True.
those people.
Yeah. I mean, I
So,
could
in fact,
see if you have someone like Dave Farmer or Ben Burt coming in and they're giving you their theory on things, I mean that's hard to do on your own to get to access to those people. But don't worry, I'm not gonna disagree with you on the school thing. Like I'm with you. It's it's very hard for me to ever recommend it to people who want to become sound designers or work in post sound in any way like that.
Yeah.
But some people don't have a choice. Some people's parents force them. So it's everyone has their own setup, the things they were given and the things that they don't have, and so it's fortunate that you're, for example, someone that is able to not go, and sounds like you're doing quite well. I mean, I didn't even know what sound design was when I was your age, so it's like, I mean, for a couple of years after I even too. I don't think I really started getting that until I was like 20, 21, and then so you're in a good spot,
Right.
man.
Yeah, and I appreciate that when you first messaged me about how I'm doing.
Yeah,
Kind of rested my mind.
yeah, you're
So
way ahead of the curve, man. So
awesome. Yeah. Cool. So let's see, next question. All right. So this one's about workflow. I know we were talking about it.
mhm.
In terms of designing sound and creating whatever sound design you need to for a scene, firstly, does a lot of your work start in Sound Miner and then export back to Pro Tools?
Yeah, I mean that's how I always design.
Always.
So yeah, always. So SoundMiner will be your database, has all your libraries scanned into it, all your own recordings, every piece of sound that you have access to that you can legally use for your work, and it's just so simple to process and click through. Like to preview sounds is extremely quick. Um, if you get the Pro version, you get Radium as well, which is an insanely powerful sampler. Um, and that just the VST rack as well. It's got everything, and it keeps your sessions light. Then it keeps your Pro Tools sessions aren't causing your computer to melt down because the processing is baked in. What's also neat about SoundMiner is, let's say you find a sound and you process it a bunch and you put it into a project. You close that project and move on to something else, and 6 months later you want to reopen it and you want to tweak that sound. You can drag that audio file back into SoundMiner and recall all of the plugins and settings that you had used on it. It stores all of that in the metadata of the file. And so
Wow,
it's really impressive how I can even restore radium patches from the sampler if I made it from the sampler radium in there. So it's just like, yeah, it's a little pricey. It's about 900, I think, US dollars, but it's a one-time payment kind of thing, and yeah, Justin just did an amazing job with that piece of software. I think that's his name. I apologize if I said that wrong. But yeah, so it starts in SoundMiner, and then you one button click things into into Pro Tools, and you can start layering and editing and sequencing things in there. Usually, what I like to do is, let's say I'm working on a scene and there's a big moment that I want to start with. I'll find a bunch of source and process it and just get ideas and just send them all into Pro Tools. So I'll just have a long chunk of different sounds, and then I can just freely just pick and choose from there and edit in, and then later take a break, come back, listen to it again, and go, okay, has good weight. It needs to be a little more dynamic. It's too compressed, flat, smush sounding, whatever. So I'll take some stuff out, maybe find something, process it less, so that it's not as squashed. And then it's kind of that routine. That's kind of my workflow for designing individual things. Scenes is designing a whole scene by yourself is a lot of work, so it really depends on what you want to start with. Some people want to start with the hard, high design stuff and build the rest of the scene around that. Other people want to start with backgrounds and Foley and build it up from simple to complex. There's no right or wrong way, but just experimentation, seeing what works best for your brain and your sensibilities.
right. So you're always starting with these individual sound effects, and you're importing them to SoundMiner, adding all these different sounds and saying, okay, this needs that. And once it's all in your Pro Tools sessions, you're hearing them all together and saying, okay, this sound works, this doesn't, this needs a little less processing,
Hmm.
and you work from there.
Basically, yeah. It's called gathering source when you do that. So yeah, you're basically thinking, okay, there's a car chase and it's a futuristic car chase and the cars come drift right by the camera. So what do I need? I probably need some engine source. So probably find some thing that would sound cool for the engines and them revving up into losing grip so that they can drift. And finding some interesting futuristic tire squeal tone. So, maybe you get some crazy bird cry or you get some dry ice on metal that you process into sounding like a tire squeal, or you get normal tire squeals and process them. Whatever, just experimenting and really getting the ideas and thinking, okay, this could be a cool textural layer for the tire. This could be maybe a tone thing. Maybe this little thing can be the head and the start of it. It can kick off the drift. Getting all those little bits and pieces, throwing them into Pro Tools, and then putting them to picture and layering them and EQing them further if you want to, or doing things like that. And it's kind of that ping pong between SoundMiner and Pro Tools that really feels dynamic and good. Because then you can have your edit halfway made and go, okay, I need a better kickoff sound, and go look for a new kickoff sound in SoundMiner and process this, put it in right away. Does it sound good next to everything else? Yes, no, and then so that's kind of the workflow for a more linear media approach. It's not too different for games if you're doing kind of individual sound effects for weapons or magic abilities or whatever. But yeah, that's kind of how I go through things.
Yeah, and it seems that from what I've seen from Pro Tools, in terms of creating sounds, it's quite difficult in terms of workflow to work through everything. So is SoundMiner that kind of creative flow that is that kind of translation to Pro Tools that gives you that faster workflow?
Yeah, well, I mean, when you say creating sounds, are you talking about like synthesizing things, or are you talking about designing and processing?
Yeah, just designing and
Hmm.
processing.
Yeah, no,
So
it gets very cumbersome. It's way easier to work with the SoundMiner VST rack than it is the Pro Tools plugin, thing. First off, you have like 5 times the amount of plugin slots, um, and it's just a lot. You don't have to deal with automation. You don't have to worry about any of that. It's not. It keeps the two separate, and it makes a lot of sense to do it that way. To me, I'll never go back to dragging sounds into Pro Tools and then putting plugins to process them, and then because then that's all running in real time too, and your session's gonna lag. If you have a whole film reel in there, and like 100 tracks with a bunch of processing and some HD video or whatever, it's like, yeah, good luck. I mean, it depends what kind of hardware you're rocking, but I mean, you're gonna burn your house down. Like, so it just makes all the sense in the world to use SoundMiner. That's where you do your processing, your sound picking, and just throwing in the ingredients. It's like going to the grocery store and you want to cook a meal. You go and you do your shopping there, and then you come home and go to Pro Tools and layer it together and try to make the final
right.
product. And if one ingredient's not right, you just go right back and get a different one.
So SoundMiner is kind of your creative flow, whereas Pro Tools is your um, finessing of the sounds.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of creativity in how you layer sounds too. So, I mean, it changes how they sound when they're played at the same time or offset slightly or whatever. So, there's a lot of creative work in there, but it's the first part of it. The big first part of it is in SoundMiner, and you can do a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think your videos showed a lot on the reel that you're saying that offsetting your sounds really emphasizes the different sound effects rather than mushing them together, and it's just all this blurred effect of sound.
Yeah. Yeah. So understanding how to avoid muddiness and keep clarity in your design and your editing is very important. And yeah, making sure that transient moments are intentionally lined up or not lined up. but understanding kind of the ramifications of, too much stuff happening at once. Speakers just can't produce the sound the right way, and it'll be garbled and it'll be unclear. So yeah, and in linear
Yeah.
media you have the luxury of the lead-in to the sound because you know the moment that that sound's going to happen, um, and so you can really play with that and give a lot of pre-definition to the sound before the moment even happens, in the lead up to it. So yeah, understanding just all the tricks and kind of ways you can get away with, creating coolness and giving things the effect you want instead of just having to plop things on top of each other right on the first frame of an action.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm always going through that one video where you were designing the reel.
Oh God,
I'm
yeah, that was.
always I'm always relearning something. I probably watched it over like 5 times now, and I'm always learning something
Oh,
new.
that's so cool, man. Yeah, I'm so embarrassed by that video though. It's funny because I watch it and I'm just like, ugh, it was late and I was just tired and I just threw stuff at the page and I think half the elements I put in that sound probably didn't need to be there because I play it and you only really hear like three or four of them. So I'm breaking my own rule there with the muddiness. But that's
Right.
also why mixers exist too. So, and
Yeah.
it is good to give them if they don't want it to sound like exactly you do, then they have other ingredients in there that they can bring out. Um, but
Right.
yeah, it's
And
that's good to hear. Yeah.
I think you're just too hard on yourself though.
Well,
As
maybe.
well. Yeah. No, no, that video is probably I like it a lot because it's so raw, which for people who are watching your videos are sound designers or want to be sound designers.
Mhm.
They want to see the video of the whole process of you, not edited,
Yeah.
just
Yeah, and I think I
so
put a couple little edits in there to just keep it like clean, but yeah, no, it's definitely seeing the step by step is important and understanding that like, people at the highest level even don't, not that that's me, but um don't have the answers right away and we do need to search around and mess around with stuff and throw shit at the wall and see if it sticks and there's nothing wrong with that. So it's good to, yeah, I think show that process happens for everyone.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, cool. All right. This is a question kind of corresponds with the last one on workflow. Um, I kind of wanted to know your experience with hardware in the sense of consoles, um, things like the Avid S6, which I'm sure is probably most used for post and film, consoles and things like that. Um, how do you think it benefits your workflow if you do use consoles and your experience in general with them?
I spent so many years just being mouse and keyboard editor, doing a lot of conforming and a lot of Foley editing, things like that. So I've always stayed away from control surfaces, just because I'm quite good with the hotkeys and I'm able to really drive Pro Tools very, very quickly and efficiently and edit very quickly and efficiently. So I think it's very important for mixers to have a very like tactile control surface like an S6 or an S3 to be able to, really just focus on the mix and not worry about getting fussy in Pro Tools and clicking and dragging things and stuff. And those consoles are also used in games as well a lot. But yeah, for me, it's if you want like a single fader or something to write automation with or whatever, that's fine. But I think as a sound designer, strictly, who's not doing mixing, I think it's a big kind of silly purchase to get an S3 or an S6 because they're not cheap. But if you're mixing and you're getting paid mixer rates, especially, that can help justify that kind of a purchase, and it does make that process a lot easier. I think it gives you the freedom to just focus on the sound and not on navigating the software interface.
Right.
But a mixer is having to really think about different things, than it's not that different, but it's a broader, it's a lot more processing power, I think, in their brains when they're going through and having to like really make these choices and uh, balance all these things together. Whereas as sound designers, we have a little bit more liberty to not have everything be too perfect. If knowing that it will go through the mix stage and be rounded off and cleaned up. Obviously as little as possible, hopefully, because we want to not make the mixer's job harder. But yeah, it's less important for us, especially because we're not writing the volumes as much. Usually, I'm usually just using clip gain to adjust my volumes in Pro Tools. I'm not like sometimes, but very rarely, I'm like drawing volume curves or anything like that, because it's just I'll put a fade if I need it to ramp up or down, and if the sound's too loud, then I'll just clip gain it up or down. I don't need to. So it's kind of pointless to have faders for me.
Mm.
So yeah.
Which is why I guess in most top companies for post, you only see a lot of these big surfaces on mixers and their stages. So
Yeah. Yeah. No,
makes
it's.
sense.
I mean, I got a little one. They have like the little Avid like control surface. It's like 8 or 10 or 12 faders or something, and they have some knobs. And I had one of those at my last company, and it was cool, but I just didn't use it that much. I used like one of them to like write volumes sometimes if I needed to, if they wanted me to like premix, which was not that often. But yeah, no, it's kind of a waste to have. I mean, sound designers aren't sitting there with like faders like balancing out the scene. That's just not really the job. Um, it's more about just putting the right stuff on the page, and then when it goes to mix, it's easier for the mixer too, I think, if things are within a reasonable range, but not having volume automation and all those things written out already, because then it might get confusing for them. Did I do that? Did they do that? Once they get into the mix, just giving them clean, straight volume lines, and they can go in and really, carve up things if they want to. And so,
Right.
yeah.
And about that I'm kind of confused as of now with, I guess, job entry wise hierarchy in
Mm.
what role is, I guess, at a more entry level, in the sense of, how do I say this? Let's say I start as an assistant sound editor. What's the hierarchy in the sense of job entries? Like, where do I go from that to a sound editor to a sound designer to maybe a re-recording mixer? From your knowledge.
Yeah, it's hard because the terminology is not, there's not like some written out standardized thing. In general, uh, assistant, associate, junior are kind of around the same level. Uh, and then just sound editor, sound effects editor, and then there could be like maybe a senior version of that, maybe a supervising sound editor, maybe. And then I would see sound designer on top of that, but maybe not, depending on where you work, because maybe there's a supervising sound editor that's in charge of the sound designers. I don't know. You have to ask the company, and um, I think yeah. And then senior sound designer, supervising sound designer, and then after that, it's starting to be like you know. In film, you're starting to get kind of the top there. I mean, there's the re-recording mixers and stuff, but they're not necessarily in charge of those people. And I haven't worked on many films, like feature films either, so I may be wrong with this. So if I'm wrong, someone in the comments tell me. But my view of it is that like the sound soup on a movie could potentially be in charge of, leading the sound overall. So music, in turn, teamed up with with a music supervisor, leading the sound design and editing team as well as the mixing team. That's how I would assume that would go. In game companies and things like that, I mean, there's not as much. There's no re-recording mixer usually, because it's if you're doing longer form media, it's probably 5 minute cinematic at most. So you have a mixer, but No one really calls them a re-recording mixer. And yeah, it's kind of a similar, junior associate, assistant, sound editor is kind of one of your lowest. Um, and then sound editor, uh, and then getting up to like junior assistant, associate, sound designer. Those are kind of all even, kind of interchangeable. Sound designer, and then there might be like sound designer level 2 or whatever, or it might be senior sound designer, or and then eventually supervising sound designer is kind of a universal. Um, like you are supervising the sound design as much as possible. And then audio director in games is what that goes up to. And the audio director is essentially in charge of just all of the sound, basically, all the audio, so music
Okay.
included. But it's hard to break it down because there's no consistent standard. Everyone's different.
And the company.
Yeah, pay rate's different. I mean, so it's really just looking at the company you're in, and understanding your abilities, and if you're in the right place in that hierarchy. And if you're not, try to lateral up somewhere else, I guess. I don't know. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's hard to answer because there's not really, you know.
Okay. And would you advise kind of starting out as a freelancer and then applying once you've gained that experience, higher position jobs, full time?
Yeah, well, in my other video, I talk about kind of the bedroom grind approach, which is like you get a job to just pay your bills, like a minimum wage job or something, and then you spend all your extra money on equipment and software and
Yeah.
and
And then
any
you
equipment
apply
you need,
for
and then you just practice
higher
for
job.
a couple years or something, and you just practice, and then you seek feedback from professionals who have succeeded, good people that know what they're talking about, and then you take their feedback and you keep applying it. That's one way. You can freelance if you feel like your chops are good enough. It can be hard if you don't have connections. See, one good thing about working in a company is you do build connections. If you're interacting with clients, other people that work there, and then maybe they leave, you meet people. It's hard to meet people when you're freelance. So there's but it's also easy to get pigeonholed in a company too and get stuck in a junior sound editor position. Hopefully, if it's a cool company, they'll promote you if you show that it's worth it, if you put the effort in. But you want to be honest with yourself about the people who are running the company and making those decisions, and when it's appropriate for you to ask for those things. Some people are very generous, others are very not generous, and everywhere in between. So um, yeah, there's benefits to each. It's kind of just seeing what works, and you can always start the freelance thing, try it out. The one thing to be wary of is that if you're applying to places, it's important to have a good quality reel, and have something impressive and unique. Excuse me. So, because if you're sending your reel out and it's kind of meh, people remember that, and so it does kind of shoot you in the foot a bit. So that's why I think like taking that time to really get as good as possible on your own, and then maybe getting a junior position at a company and exposing yourself to different projects, different people. In-person teaching is really useful if that ever comes back, if the pandemic ends. But yeah, that's important. But sending your reel out if you're very new to the industry to high-end people, it can not be good. It can be a bad look. You really want to put your best foot forward for that first impression. You want them to go, who is this guy? How have I never heard of him? This stuff's awesome. Like, this is so unique, or whatever, some kind of reaction like that, other than, oh, this is the guy that sent us that thing a couple years back and it was really bad. I guess he got a bit better. I don't know. I mean, you can still get a job that way, but it's
Still a
it
bad
hurts you in the
first.
numbers game. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Um. Yeah, and I guess that's kind of you could see being in a company can start you out for connections. Um, for you and being in you're on a professional level. At least I think so. Do you prefer? I know you worked in companies before.
Mm.
Right now you are freelancing, right?
No, I work for a company.
Yeah, now you work in a company. Um, you you experienced both worlds. How do you kind of find both worlds?
Well, I only freelanced for like a month, and then I got an offer to join the company that I was freelancing for, and um, so I can't talk too much about lifestyle of being freelance. I think it's hard to go out with no name and do that. I think it is good to, at least if the goal is freelance, to have that freedom and to build up your own client list and all that. Putting in 3 to 5 years at a decent company first is going to really help you, because people come and go sometimes, and you'll be able to. I mean, I know that if I walked out of my company today, I could find freelance work, and it would mainly be through people that I've worked with before in a company position, whether it was this company or my previous one. So that's super valuable. It's a good way for people to get to work with you without. When you hire someone freelance, it's like a big commitment. But if you work with someone because they're on a team, on a company that you're working with, it's whether they're the client or maybe they work in house with you or something. It's just a lot easier to build up a repertoire with people, and for them to understand that you do quality stuff, you have high standards, you're a good guy or girl or whatever. But
Yeah, and
yeah,
that
it's so that would be my recommendation.
and at that point you're not kind of stressing to find jobs yourself. You're just getting them from the connections you have.
Yeah, hopefully. I mean, hopefully it's you get to pick, but yeah, and your rate can be a lot higher as freelance, of course, because you're not getting healthcare, and you're not, you can charge more. But it's hard because there aren't that many sound designers to talk to, and a lot of people I don't think don't want to talk about this stuff as much. And everyone has very different paths to get there. So what I'm saying isn't law. It's not. It's just kind of what I've experienced. So take it for what
Yeah,
it is.
yeah, cool. Um, all right, so to you, what differentiates someone that's amateur as a sound designer to someone that's a professional sound designer? Some
Mm,
things you pinpoint.
mm. It's just quality and lack of beginner mistakes. Um, that's really it. It's hard to list all those out, but
Right.
it's like if you press play on someone's thing and it just plays and it feels good and sounds good and it just hits the right moments and stuff, and there's not the spatialization doesn't feel off, or the low end isn't all wonky, and it just feels tight and right and good, then it's very, very obvious, when you're talking about someone who's like professional and like quite excellent versus a beginner. Um, there's a big gap there of just uh, you know taste and aesthetic and the way things are executed and the uniqueness of it. Um, with the beginner, you can kind of tell like they struggled to make it sound decent enough, but with an expert, you can tell they got to pick and choose how it sounded because they know how to make it sound good. They just wanted to try something new, or they just wanted to put in this interesting texture and this little pause moment or something, whatever. Like they got to have fun with it a bit because they understand their ear is so good that they're not going to have some weird like funkiness in there at all. Whereas a beginner, might struggle to make the low end feel right, make the impactfulness feel right, and everything in between. So
Right.
uh,
And
yeah.
the professional knows how to fill in the whole frequency range
Yeah, in the right
correct.
ways, right? Yeah, making things feel just that sandwich of sound that hits your ear is just pleasurable. It's just nice. It's a good tasting sandwich for your, it's like, and then beginner, it's like, it's too much mustard and, you put 7 pickles on it, and it's just like there's things like that where it's very. I like comparing sound to food because it makes it more tangible, but it is
Yeah.
that glaring. It's like most beginner things I listen to, it's like I can give 20 notes on a moment. And it's not that that'll help them, but it's just when someone of a very high caliber designs, it's like, well, maybe they could have done something more like this, but no, it sounds, like there's no blatant like bad things about it. It just comes down to subjective artistic decisions, and maybe I agree with it or maybe I disagree with it, but I can't knock it for being poorly executed, because they had a vision and they went for it, and they were able to execute. So, yeah, those are the main
Yeah.
things.
And I think that's why it's great you kind of in your videos advertise all these libraries and plugins, because
Mm.
even though there is that technique gap and experience gap, there's also that, in food terms, like the ingredient gap,
Mm-hmm.
that the professional sound designer not
Yes.
only has all these libraries, but he has all these custom recordings.
Yeah, they have years of stuff. And people trade stuff too. Like if I go to somewhere and do a big recording session and might go over to my friend that I know and be like, "Hey, like I'll trade you my, Desert Explosions I just recorded for your car recordings or whatever." People swap and there's a whole like a black market of the sound effects stuff going on. So yeah, there's a whole arsenal of high quality things. Um, And yeah, it's tricky though, giving people who are more beginners those libraries too, because they do have a lot of pre-designed sounds in them, especially the boom ones. They have a big collection of very good sounding pre-designed sounds, and a lot of them you can just plop in and they'll work. So they'll never work as well as something that was custom crafted for that scene with all the context of what's going on. But yeah, people need to be wary when they get those early on. Is like try to recreate the design sound with the construction kit sounds in the boom library, maybe. Like that's because those design sounds were made from the construction kit sounds by Boom. So I forget the guys' names that do those, but yeah, it's like playing with fire a little bit when you give people things that other people have made and they can kind of just. But if you're in a pinch, you need to design something really quick, it can help too. So that's why they do it. But
Yeah, and that's something I like to do a lot, where even if it's not from the Boom library, I'd try recreate Boom library sounds with whatever other libraries I have.
that's great. Yeah, all that stuff is really good, and it's good too because you have the sound so isolated. Whereas if you were taking a sound from a film or something, it might have music over it or dialogue, but this is like you literally just have the sound and you can slow it down and you can isolate different frequencies, and yeah, it's good.
Um, and like you said, other than people trading in all these libraries, the specific companies also have their whole range of all the libraries they recorded.
Yep.
So
Yep, there's access to ingredients is important, and the libraries even things out a bit, but a good sound designer can take a couple basic libraries and do a pretty damn good job with it too. So at the end of the day, it's not a make or break, but I understand it's hard.
yeah,
Just collect as many as possible, and do as much recording as possible yourself too, and yeah, you'll get there.
in fact, now we're putting in a budget for more sound gear. We're
Yeah,
looking into some microphones. Um, since I work on set as well, we're looking into a lot of things like recorders and having my own bag for me.
yeah, little sound devices or something that you can.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, those are good recorders.
So I'm trying to pitch in some plugins and libraries as well.
Cool.
Yeah,
You're getting a nice broad range of skills, man. The on-set production sound and choosing and picking gear and budgeting and designing and doing the post stuff, probably cleaning up the production sound too. I mean, you're gonna have a whole deck of cards to offer the industry, and you're going to be valuable because of that. And it is good to specialize to some extent, right, at some point, but I like that you're getting to kind of try all these different things and really feel out, what you like more. And it sounds like you're leaning more towards the sound design and post part,
Yeah.
but it's good that you can make that decision with the knowledge of what it's like to be on set and doing production sound, because a lot of people love that more. And so a lot of people don't know because they've never gotten to try it. So it's good. You're doing all the right things in that sense, especially given your age and like, where you're at. It's like perfect. Just like try as many things as you possibly can in the industry and take your temperature on it. And it'll feel so good in 5 years when you're down the road, been working your ass off to become a sound designer, to know like, no, I know what that's like, and I know I don't want to do that, and I know what that's like, and I want to do what I'm doing. And a lot of people, I didn't have that for a long time, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to quit or not for a while. And that had to do with a whole lot of things, with just like my work-life balance at the time, and the projects, and some of the people I was working with. But yeah, I mean, that's going to be a nice thing for you to have, is that experience of at least knowing what it's like and what you're doing now, that you're in the catbird seat in whatever you end up deciding to do. So
Yeah, and it's also good because I have that kind of, if I'm on set and I'm recording on the boom and lapel mics, whatever, not only just recording that, but I'm then going back to it in post and hearing what I recorded. I'll listen and say, oh shit, here it was way too low, my clip gain was way too low, or all this noise, how didn't I realize it? So I'm learning as well back to it.
You should record Foley on the set if there's time. You should have the actors walk their Foley. I forget which director does that. He's like a legendary director, but I don't know if Foley's ever a pain in the butt for you guys or not. But if there's time when they're setting up another shot or something, you can just have the actors. Oh, I guess everyone needs to be quiet on the set when you do it, but you can have the actors, walk the set or the location. And
yeah, well, we always record at least room tone.
Yeah, well, that you need that for sure to be able to denoise, but
yeah.
But it's nice too if they're walking around a dining room or something and just getting a quiet set and getting to get the boom really close to like their feet, or their not too close, right? Of course, because you still want a little bit of space for the distance, but not being focused on their dialogue and being more focused on their movements and it's in the same space that it's filmed in, can make your Foley sound super just awesome, super accurate, real.
Yeah, and yeah, that's it. I enjoy all of it, really. I mean, to be doing this as a job at my age it's a humbling experience.
It's crazy. It's not many people are doing what you're doing at all. So hats off to you, man.
So with iLok, I could use Pro Tools at home as well.
Yeah, you get a little USB iLok, and that's what validates your licenses. And you just have the iLok Manager app installed. And yeah, if you try to boot up Pro Tools without your iLok plugged in, it'll say can't find licenses. I won't open. And if it's plugged in, it should open. So yeah, as long as you have that with you.
Then that's what I'll do.
Yeah.
I'll get the normal version and I'll use Pro Tools here.
That could be cool. Get a little iLok, and they'll have to ship an iLok out to you. But yeah.
Yeah, and I've tried the trial version of Pro Tools. It's come to the point where I've been watching so many Pro Tools videos that at first Pro Tools seems overwhelming, but with all the videos I've been watching, it's starting to get at least a bit more familiar.
Yeah, I mean, you're gonna have to cross that road eventually, so you might as well just get it out of the way and just
exactly. That's why I'm
get through it.
Get Pro Tools.
Yeah, because it's a weird program. It's got a lot of different things on it, but it's not that bad, and there's tons of resources online for any questions or things you run into. Working out bugs in Pro Tools and like crashes and stuff can be a bit of a pain, but just learning usage and stuff isn't that bad. So
yeah, and since it was always kind of advertised for professionals, the resources you do find are usually people who are at least sort of in the industry, whereas a lot of other videos are students and video editors.
Yeah, well, most people are doing music too, um, instead of sound design or whatever. But yeah.
Yeah.
So I have. Is there more questions, or did we get through all of them?
We'll have a few more. We can just fly through them because I know
Let's try to fly through them so this video isn't too long.
yeah, we've been kind of going off. So I think we have two more. So, or no, we actually have one more. Okay,
Oh, perfect.
cool, great. So this is more focused on sound design specifically. So when you're working with designing gunshots, um, how would you differentiate your approach from kind of traditional gunshots, hyper realistic, to futuristic
Right.
gunshots?
Right, I remember this question. So you're
Is
talking
there
about,
similarities
are you
and
talking about making a variety of different guns that are like just the differences between like designing a sci-fi gun, laser gun versus a real life looking pistol,
yeah,
things
right.
like that?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I mean, the the main thing to understand with things like gunshots and like kind of signature sounds like that are, and when I say signature, I mean they have such a recognizable like envelope and kind of recognizable character that you can really make a gunshot from anything, and as long as there's a very short, quick attack followed then by some kind of tone or tail with some kind of low end thump later after a bit. So that it's like that kind of, and it doesn't do justice in my mouth, but like imagine that part is actually
Yeah,
like subby or low end, and you can I get annoyed actually while I'm designing. I'm trying to make different abilities for a game I'm working on or something like that, and it has some transient moment and it starts sounding like a gun because it'll have that kind of envelope and character to it, and it's like totally non-gun related source that I'm using, but it's been processed to be, have a very sharp loud head that's very short and then like a tail and a low end little bump after it, and it
right.
starts sounding like a laser gun, and it's like not a sci-fi game, so I don't want things to sound like laser guns, and it's annoying. So there's unlimited ways to differentiate that. If you're dealing with something grounded in reality, like a policeman shooting a pistol or an army guy shooting an assault rifle or whatever, then you're gonna want to probably stick with some real recordings. There's some great gun libraries out there, uh, and that'll get you most of the way there. And then you can emphasize things and compress certain things and add in little metal gears if you want to. You can add little accents, a little metal pingy thing on top or whatever. But if you get into sci-fi guns, it starts getting like, I mean, the whole world is your oyster. I mean, you could use the head of a normal gun. And when I say head, just to be clear, it's probably like a 3 to 10 or 3 to 8 frame long, piece of sound that's just
Yeah, right.
the initial
Very sharp.
the initial explosion moment, and it's quite loud, but it's so short that it doesn't really affect or take up too much headroom. Um, yeah, you could use anything. I mean, you can use a real gunshot. You could use any kind of impact that you just compress the shit out of and make really short and really loud. You can use like an explosion head. You can use some synth impact thing, and then having some sort of tail. Usually for sci-fi, you want some kind of tone, like or something or whatever you find. So that again can be something synth based. It could be a bird cry that you process. It could be a baby screaming. It could be a dog growling. It could be a whatever. I mean, you could use a spring like Ben Burt in the Star Wars originals. can use process glass breaking. I mean, anything that has any kind of recognizable character or tone that you can then modulate or change or affect in some way, or not, or just leave it sounding real and dry. But if it's like a futuristic sci-fi weapon, you might want some cool thing in there. And then having that low end as well come in, and then the distant echo as well. But just understanding the shape of that sound, kind of being the and then the tail at the end. That's kind of what we recognize as a gunshot, and if it's set up the right way, you can really use anything. So it's both easy and hard, because it's easy because you can use anything, and it's hard because you can use anything. So, but that's the main differences between sci-fi and real guns. Is I would stick with real gun recordings, and maybe sweetening it if you need to with other assets, but the majority of the sound being well recorded guns, and you can process them a bit and use different distances or layers, but that's going to keep you grounded. Yeah, and you can mix and match guns too. You know, you can use like the head of an assault rifle shot, but then the tail of a pistol shot or an explosion or something. That was all real recorded. So you can do that, but yeah, really keeping it grounded in reality is important there, because you start getting too tonal or too crazy, it'll get surreal, and if that's what you want, like the thing that I recreated, that slow motion gunshot. I mean, that, you know, it was surreal and dreamy and super over the top, like emotional dramatic moment or whatever. So I just went, you know, super hardcore with weird tones and spinny sounding things. And but yeah, if it's just a scene of like a army guy shooting at something, I mean, you don't want to do too much of that stuff. You want to keep it pretty, you can make it punchy and sound good. The guns in Tomorrow War sound pretty good. Tim Walston and Jay Jennings did a pretty good job with those. The creatures sound really good as well. But yeah, I would look at those for like good reference for like guns. And then for sci-fi stuff, it's like, I mean, there's so much, but I don't watch a lot of sci-fi either, so it's hard to think of things. But I mean, the guns in the new Halo Infinite that came out sound quite nice. So those are two interesting references.
Yeah.
And they have human guns in there as well too, to reference.
Right. So in sci-fi, kind of any sound goes, as long as the whole shape of the design still is a gunshot, still has the shape of a gunshot, which is what the viewer familiarizes with the sound.
Yeah, I mean, it's still doing the same thing a normal gun would do. It's just using some energy core or laser or magic or whatever. And so any sound goes, but it does, like, you want to know, let me add this caveat, like, you want to really think about what it is. Like, you want it to be realistic too. So, I mean, what if it's some, like, I am thinking of like the gravity gun in Half-Life. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but like it's, you know, if it's a gun like that where it has kind of a grate around it and it kind of has this core thing in the middle, and it like, you know, you want to think about that construction of the gun and what that would sound like. You know, how would that grate resonate? Would this energy core have some plasma feature to it that it would be sizzly when it cools down and dripping out a little bit or something? So you want to look at it and really get, you know, don't be afraid to tell a very detailed story in a simple way. You know, if it's like a beam and it's locking on, does the metal start resonating to like a, you know, a note, and does that have a cool build up moment? I mean, are the air particles around the beam, you know, sizzling and getting, you know, if you're hitting metal, is it like making the metal scream because it's so hot? Things like that. It's important. So yes, you can use any sounds, but you want to keep it with what your imagination can tell you about the visuals that you're presented with. So that's the only caveat. But yeah, you know, go hog wild. Like it's fun cutting that stuff because you can really just, yeah.
Yeah, and right now I'm using I have the mechanicals library that you referenced in that video. The boom gunshot libraries. And the explosions boom library.
The urban explosions?
Yeah.
Yeah, those are good. That should be plenty to make some guns.
Yeah.
Are you dealing with a lot of sci-fi guns or a lot of real guns, or both?
Um, well, right now this is just on my own time. I'm working
Mm.
on there's a scene in Terminator 2
Hmm.
where
The
the
shotgun or the
the shotgun.
yeah,
That's the one I'm working on
very
right now.
famous sound. It's a
Yeah.
bit old, but timeless also. So
Yeah.
definitely good thing to try to recreate. I mean, your sounds might sound higher fidelity, or should sound higher fidelity, especially if you're using those libraries. Because that movie came out in like '92, I think. So
Yeah,
you
that's
know,
it.
but
Um,
that might be it. Might there will be a challenge of the probably analog style tape like saturation in that shot and stuff. But it's a good
yeah, right.
challenge. Try to make it work.
Yeah, I'm soon done. Right now I'm working on the tail. Because mine kind of sounded like where the original is like a
Yeah, yeah. The tail gives a lot of power. Um,
yeah.
yeah. Well, you got a whole
Even
library of explosions you can use tails from too, at various
yeah.
distances as well.
And I think that's what's interesting about it is even though it's just in this regular like hall, it still has this huge tail.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, they're telling the story of the power of that shotgun, right? It's not meant to be a literal
yeah,
simulation of real life, what it would sound like. It's this Hollywoodized version of this is a powerful fucking bionic humanoid like robot shooting this fucking big ass gauge
yeah,
shotgun. So
yeah.
yeah,
Um, yeah, I'll send that to you when I'm done.
yeah, go for it.
Yeah, should be done soon though. So
Awesome, man. All right,
cool.
well, I need to go lay down. I just had surgery like a week and a half ago, so I'm like kind of beat up. You can even see some of the bruising here, but yeah, my
Yeah.
whole
Oh, right.
side is just like kaput right now. So
Yeah, you said you got injured.
yeah, it was
Yeah.
a snowboarding fall. So it's all good. I'll be
Yeah.
better soon, but yeah, I gotta go rest up a little bit. Um, but it was great talking to you, Miles. And hopefully some of the stuff helped. And I hope your company starts getting you some better stuff to use. And but it sounds like you're doing awesome stuff, man. And yeah, keep it up. I'm sure this talk will have helped a lot of other people, hopefully. So
Yeah, I hope so. It definitely helped me. Tomorrow I start working on my first short film. So that should be interesting.
that's exciting.
Yeah, I'm quite excited. But
Well, have fun, and if you're struggling, just send me a clip of what you have or whatever, and you know, it'll be
yeah,
fine.
I will, man. Thanks. This has inspired me a lot. So yeah,
Great, dude. So good to hear. Well, I'll catch up with you later. Just
yeah,
ping me if
man.
there are any questions or anything. But yeah, keep it up, man. You're doing all the right stuff. So
Thanks, man. I really appreciate you calling and giving me some advice.